Hey, Walter Sorrells from Walter Sorrells Blades. Today, make your own micarta. So one of the things that I think custom knife makers start to run into, when you start out as a hobbyist knife maker, the first thing you try and do is sort of imitate stuff that other guys are doing. And that's cool as far as it goes, but once you start trying to differentiate yourselves from other knife makers, you're always searching around for that extra little edge, something that's different, something that's new. If you go to the, standard suppliers of knife making equipment, what you find is that you've got a lot of the same materials that everybody else who's making custom knives buys. And so if everybody's using the same materials and similar designs, then everything starts to kind of look the same. So we're always looking for that edge of something that's a little different. So what I'm going to show you how to do today is to make your own micarta. Now, for those of you who aren't too sure what micarta is, it's an engineered material that was invented a long, long time ago. I think it was brought out by Westinghouse Corporation probably almost 100 years ago. I could be wrong about that. Anyway, the basic idea is that you have a rosin, phenolic rosin, polyester rosin, something like that, which is impregnated into a whole bunch of layers, substrates of, it could be linen, could be cotton, could be paper, but by building up these layers and then attaching them together in essence with rosin, you have a very, very strong material. It was originally intended for, electronic devices or something like that as an insulator. But what knife makers have found is that by shaping micarta, you're able to get a really interesting sort of wood grain pattern. Now the thing is, if you go to the knife makers' supply places, they all sell the same kind of micarta. The cool thing about micarta is that it's actually a pretty simple material. And so what we're going to show you how to do today is to make your own, and by learning to do it yourself, you're going to be able to kind of open up a window into all kinds of new techniques so that you can come out with micarta that is totally different from anything that anybody else on the planet's doing. Gives you a little edge, a little something that differentiates your knives from all the rest of those guys making those black tactical knives that look exactly the same. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so let's talk about the materials we're going to use. I use 3 different kinds of material. One is a sort of heavy linen, one's a very thin muslin, and one is cotton canvas that I kind of harvested from an army surplus pup tent. But you could use any kind of cloth, denim, whatever's laying around. And I cut them into squares about 6 inches per side. So now as far as the resin that we're using, I'm using Bondo fiberglass resin. It's the kind that's used for fixing car bodies. You can get it from most any auto parts store. This costs, I guess, around 25 bucks for a quart. It's not cheap, but not super expensive either. Okay, so we've also got some equipment. Pretty simple little jury rig press that I made. It's composed of aluminum and then another plate of you could use MDF or chipboard, but the key on this whole thing is that you want a super flat surface. I've also got some carpenter's clamps, and I'll be using gloves, at least when I remember to put them on, and a respirator. This is an extremely messy, extremely stinky process, so you don't want to do this in your living room. You want to have newspapers underneath because this gunk squeezes out all over the place. Paper towels are handy, some kind of solvent for cleaning your hands, rubber gloves, respirator, like I said. Next, you mix the resin according to the manufacturer's recommendation. For this project, 4 ounces is about right. Now, theoretically, if you mix it correctly, it should start to harden in about 10 minutes. So you kind of have to work quickly. So basically what you're going to do is just layer the cloth up and cover it with resin. So the thing that you have to make sure is that the resin completely impregnates the cloth. So I've used this little makeshift spatula to dump some stuff on, and then I'll spread it completely across one layer, and then I'll put on another layer. Now in this particular case, I'm doing a pattern of 2 of the green cloth and 3 sheets of the black cloth. You know, that was just random. That's what I chose ahead of time, and we'll see how that pattern turns out later. If the cloth is friendly to you, you can put on several at once and just kind of slather enough resin on there, and it'll soak all the way through. If the cloth doesn't like you, you may have to go sheet by sheet. It all depends on what kind of cloth you're using. You want to decide on what your pattern's going to be ahead of time. You want everything laid out so that you don't have to make any decisions or go running off for stuff, because this stuff cures pretty fast, and you know, if you have to take a break in the middle, you might as well throw it all out and start over. Key things are, you want plenty of resin, and you want to get rid of any bubbles as you go, squeezing them out as you go with your little spatula or your fingers or whatever. Just layer, layer, layer. Ultimately, I'm aiming for about 1/4 of an inch, you know, give or take. As you're going forward, recognize a bunch of the resin is going to get squeezed out. So whatever thickness it looks like it's going to be, it'll actually be a little thinner than that. Okay, so once I use up all the resin, I quit. Now I staple right out at the very edges. If you don't do this stapling step, the whole thing can kind of slip sideways because it's very slippery, and once it goes out of whack like that, you know, you may not see it happen, but it'll throw off the stacking process. So that's why I go ahead and staple the edges. Then I cover it up with another layer of wax paper and plastic, sort of pat it down to smooth it out and get all the bubbles out. And then I go ahead and put the top plate on and clamp it very gently. So the key thing here is, I don't want to just crank one side down. I want it to be even, so that all the edges of the billet, or whatever you want to call it, of micarta, are roughly the same thickness. So I clamp slowly, turn, you know, moving my way around the clamps as I go. You don't want to necessarily clamp the crap out of it. You want some rosin to stay in there. I actually measure the gaps on the edges with a micrometer, so that I don't end up one side, you know, having one side get much thicker than the other. And that's basically it. So basically, you know, you can layer this stuff any number of ways. You can go all one color. You can, you know, go 2 or 3 different colors. It's totally up to your imagination. Okay, so now you've got the basic idea. So here's where it kind of gets fun. You can really let your imagination go wild. You can use string, you could use yarn, I don't know, steel wool, plastic beads, anything you can stick into the resin that might cause, you know, some kind of interesting pattern. Hey, give it a try. You can also buy polyester resin dyes if you want green or red or some color like that. Recognize that the resin itself is kind of a dark brown color, so you're not going to be able to turn it bright yellow or something, but you can certainly move that color around in the dark end of the color spectrum. So here's another little project that I did that's kind of neat. This one's going to generate a sort of camo effect. I just took all the fabric that I used in these previous 3 projects, and I just chop it into little random shapes and squares and triangles and stuff, and then I mix it all together. Then I drop it into the resin and really just mix the snot out of it. You want to make sure, again, that the whole key to this thing is, if you get little pockets of air, or if the materials that you're using don't get impregnated with the resin, then it's going to be very weak. It's going to be susceptible to cracking, and it's going to look crappy. Especially when you're grinding it, it'll delaminate or pieces will fly out and little chunks will come off and it'll look awful. So you really, really want to make sure that every single bit of this thing is filled with resin. So once I got it all mixed up, I take all this crap, put it into the plastic bag. So then I'll staple one edge of the plastic bag. It's contained in the other three edges, but I want that one edge sort of stabilized so that the material's not going to just creep its way out. And then I clamp it up just like I did the previous one. And voila, here's the final effect. So now that we're done with a few different projects, let's take a look and see how they look on finished knives. You be the judge. And if you hate it, hey, do it your own way. Alright, thanks for watching. If you make a cool brew of micarta, shoot me a photo of it. I'd love to see one. Hope you're enjoying this series of videos. If you did, check out my website, waltersorrellsblades.com, where you'll find lots more videos in this vein, along with plenty of examples of my own work. Also, like my page, Walter Sorrells Blades, on Facebook. Thanks for watching.